rap artist. This time, Ynw Melly is the accused. Monday was day one in the double murder trial. Melly, whose given name is JAMELL, is accused of killing two men he called his friends. In October of 2018, Melly's best friend, Cortland Henry, showed up at a Miami hospital claiming his friends were caught in a drive-by shooting and were bleeding out in his car. Anthony Williams and Christopher Thomas had multiple gunshot wounds and were pronounced dead. Henry told officers they were shot at while leaving a recording studio. But when police got there, they say there was no evidence that a drive-by had occurred. Investigators determined the victims were shot by someone in the car, and surveillance showed four men inside, including Melly. Police arrested Melly and Henry on 2 counts of first-degree murder each. They are being tried separately, have both pled not guilty.
Ain't get to roll no weed, ain't get to roll no swishers. I was locked up on Christmas, ain't get to see my niggas, ain't get to hug my mama.
The men were shot to death in an SUV after leaving a late-night recording session on October 26, 2018, with Melly and another group member, Cortland Henry, who went by YNW Bortland. Bortland was driving the SUV. Later that morning, Bortland showed up at the hospital. Juvie and Sack Chaser were dead in the car. Melly was not with them. Chris, first of all, I know this has been a difficult almost 5 years now. How are you doing right now with this trial finally starting?
It's kind of overwhelming at times, but doing the best I can at the moment.
A lot of people may not know a lot about your son. What do you want people to know about him? We know he was, an aspiring rapper. He was part of this YNW group.
Chris was a good kid. He's the second of my oldest boys. He's the oldest of his mom's kids, and he loved his whole family. He loved all his friends, and he just got caught up for being too loyal and got betrayed by one of his so-called friends. It's a sad situation for everybody.
Tell me a little bit about that, because, it's my understanding that Juvie was friends with Melly and Sack Chaser for quite some time. Tell me, when did you first come to know Melly?
I met Melly around like 99, like a couple years before Chris met him. I was friends with his Melly's mom, best friend at the time. And that's how I got to know Melly. Then Chris got to know him after that. They was all good kids coming up, just laughing, playing, joking with each other, having fun, like to hang out with each other. And he loved them boys, and he loved them to a fault.
So he was friends with them since they were little kids then, it sounds like.
Yes, ma'am. They went to elementary, middle school, high school, all together. That's how I know his mom as well, and his stepdad and the rest of his family, Melly's family. And the music started, I think, around 2000, maybe 13.
And they were just all making the music together?
Yes. Started from rapping at school until making music together and coming up with the name, the YNW, and just went from there. And Sack and Chris and Melly and even Jay Green was all founder members of the YNW. Melly was just the face of it. I say now that Chris and Anthony is gone, now he just took everything over.
It sounds like your son and the other guys had a lot of really big dreams.
Yes, ma'am, they did. They love music. They love to perform. And they was on their way, to do big things, and it just got cut short. This tragedy. Everybody else around still trying to pick up the pieces. Like, a lot of families got broken with this situation.
Melly is saying that he is innocent. His defense attorneys are saying the state can't prove its case. But it's my understanding you believed from the very beginning that Melly was responsible for your son's death and the death of Anthony.
From the day one, I believe that Melly was responsible for my son's death on October 26th when I first heard the story, because his explanation, when I finally talked to him and Cortland on a FaceTime, their response and how they was reacting, they showed no remorse. They didn't act like they was grieving, like they lost a best friend or nothing. They was, in my opinion, they was in the best spirits. They never came to town, never came to my son's funeral, never came to Sack funeral. And these are best friends. He passed straight through the county of Indian River, went to Brevard and did a music video, but he couldn't even stop and pay his condolences to his best friend's mom. He even got Jana tatted on his neck. That's why his defense attorney got him wearing turtlenecks and shirts to hide his neck, because he got the Jana tatted on his neck. That's Sack mom's name, and he got Chris' name and Sack name. And this guy, that guy is just, I have no words for that guy.
What was it in particular that was said on that FaceTime that made you think that Melly was responsible?
Nothing was said. Actually, it was like the demeanor. It was like the body language, really. Like I was just reading them, and as I'm telling them and asking them questions, I got so emotional, I started crying. They wasn't reacting to, they act like they didn't have take a loss at all. That's how I took it. And then when I was talking to them, I still had in the back of my mind that something's not right. Something's not right.
Did they tell you anything about what they claimed happened with the drive-by they claim happened?
No, they had absolutely no explanation. Like, we have to figure it out just like the police.
Chris, why do you think that this happened? Why do you think, Melly did this? Because, Melly is on trial. The state has to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt that he committed these crimes. But why do you think this happened?
I think the story about the $200,000 with Anthony was a true story, because it's not reported, but Chris told me the same story, and also with a $500,000 play, and Melly was going to get $200,000, Sack was going to get $200,000, Chris was going to get $100,000, and as I'm hearing it from Chris, they was going to sell the YNW brand, not a record deal or nothing like that. It was like for the brand itself, and by them being founding members, they was going to get a piece of the pie. So I don't think Melly did it on his own. I think that manager guy got in his ear and did a little divide and conquer. Because if it was up to Sack, it would never be a 100K management.
They were going to sell the YNW name for licensing or to sell products. What do you mean they were going to sell the name?
For marketing, licensing, stuff like that. I think they want to go up on the bigger umbrella just to push them. I think push the brand more global. That's what I'm thinking.
And so you think that Melly wanted a bigger cut of that then?
I think Melly didn't want to give them guys nothing. He wanted to be the only one to shine. And then they came to town next day and gave the mothers $15,000, the other mother $10,000. So I thought to myself, if Sack was going to get $200,000, Chris was getting $100,000. If we could pay these people $25,000, keep $275,000, that's how I saw it. It just nothing added up. And Melly still to this day for me to hear him call them boys his best friend is an insult. That is an insult.
Was there any sign of bad blood before your son's life was taken and before Anthony was killed? Or was there any tension there that you knew of?
Not with Juvie, not with Chris, but you heard things about him and Anthony getting into like altercations about disputes about money over certain situations, and they got in a fight prior to that, and they said, like, the story that they say Sack beat him up and knocked his goals out in front of his girlfriend, and like 2 days later, I think that's when the incident happened.
Chris, I know that something that has to be really hard about this is the fact that there are relatives here, relatives of Cortland Henry, who are also relatives of the victims.
Yes. Chris and Cortland share a sister, and she's my daughter. Her and Chris had the same dad, which is me, and her and Cortland share the same mom. And she took the side of Melly. She still to this free Melly, all on her Facebook, Instagram. She'll go live with the free Melly shirts, and they just got her brainwashed with the money. They just showering her with gifts and Cortland, and got my daughter just brainwashed to the fact that she wishing the killer of her brother was free. And I just don't understand that. That's a heartbreaking feeling, man. For me to see that daily, her saying that, that's just heartbreaking.
Do you talk to your daughter about this?
We haven't talked. She was living with me up until the time shortly after the funerals, and then we went our separate ways. I haven't talked to her in over 2 years.
So it sounds like you've lost 2 children.
Yes, ma'am. And them the 2 that look like me the most, and it's crazy.
Are you hoping that this trial, maybe at the end, things can change with your daughter?
Yeah, once she see the truth and them boys get convicted, I'm hoping that her whole demeanor change. But knowing them, they're going to be like, wait till the appeal. He's still innocent. Wait till the appeal. But just have to wait and see, man. It's going to be a process.
I know you watched a lot of the first day of the trial. How did you feel it was going so far? And have you watched today as well?
Yes, ma'am. I think it's going pretty good. It's just a long process. Just got to trust the process in my book. And I think she's doing a good job. I think once the ballistic, the forensics, the cell phone, and when it showed that Chris got shot on his left cheek and the back wrist, he got shot from this side of the car in his left cheek with stifling on his face and the burn marks on his face from the gun muzzle. All that's going to point in the one direction to that guy that was sitting in the back driver's side.
And Christine Bradley, the prosecutor, had said yesterday that the medical examiner is going to testify that before the shots were fired into the vehicle, that your son and Anthony, they were already dead. And when those shots went into the vehicle, they had already been shot, and the fatal shots came from the back seat. That's the testimony that's expected.
Yes, ma'am. From my understanding, yes, the shot that Chris left cheek was the fatal shot that took him out. And then when he staged the drive-by, the shots from the back, they could tell by the way Chris' body was slumped over how, like, it was staged after the fact. Yeah, that's going to come out. I can't wait. That's going to be like breaking news. And with Chris wasn't killed in the drive-by. I know that for a fact.
One thing that Christine Bradley said yesterday was that in the days leading up to this, Melly was learning the oath of loyalty to the G-Shine blood set, to a gang. Did you know anything about that? Had your son ever discussed anything with you about this gang that Melly was allegedly becoming a part of?
No, that was something he was doing in his private life on his own, separate from Kristen. And Christine or the lawyers was always saying that Chris lived in Miramar. Chris never lived down there. He lived in Gifford. Florida. He might go down there for a day or two, but he always had the same address, same house, same everything, up until his time of passing.
Well, I wanted to play some clips from the trial so far. And Chris, I want to get your feelings on some of what was said in opening statements. This is Christine Bradley, the assistant state attorney, talking about what amounts to possibly a confession in this case.
So in summary, the last thing I want to tell you that the evidence will show is that in the Instagram, because the defendant had a moderate social media following at the time of these events, people are reaching out to him. Some fans, some friends, some associates. You'll see on October 26th, after about 8 a.m. in the morning, Eastern time, multiple messages are coming in. Messages are coming in from individuals checking to see if he's okay, if he's been injured in this drive-by. If it's true that Anthony Williams, who's also sometimes referred to as Sack, and Chris Thomas, who is referred to as Juvie, are really dead. One individual, and specifically, sends out, and I want to quote the message exactly that you will hear, and says, right after this, "Yo, homie, you good? Let me know something." And so, ladies and gentlemen, this is where context matters. What does that mean? If you work at Google and you say, "My whole floor is coding," that's a good thing. If you work at Broward General Hospital and you say, "My whole floor is coding," that is a bad thing. The context around the messages matters. So in the context of this message, this individual is reaching out, asking if Mr. Demons is good, after he's been tagged in multiple social media posts about this drive-through, this shooting. And Mr. Demmons responds very succinctly, "I did that." Shh.
Chris, when you heard that, what did you think?
Sound like a cryptic confession to me. Like she said, if you take everything into context, it sounded like he was speaking on the incident that happened, and he admitted to doing it and said, "Shh, don't say anything about it." That's how I took it.
Now, Bryson, good afternoon. I am so happy to have you on, sir.
Hey, how's it going? How's it going?
Good. So, Bryson, what moments in the courtroom stuck out to you so far?
Definitely the opening statement from the defense that pretty much went through every pothole in the prosecution's opening statement originally and gave a very hilarious reference to a C+C Music Factory classic, that things that make you go, when they had to pretty much break down what the prosecution was trying to claim that Ynw Melly was allegedly accused of, when actually they showed plenty of evidence that showed that he wasn't.
Well, what is the reference that you just referred to, and what did the jury do when that reference happened?
Some of the jurors knew what he was talking about. A lot of them didn't. It's a very very older jury. So a few people got it, a few people didn't. It's from the 90s, so it's kind of hard to, to remember that far back.
Well, let me get it back. For our viewers who don't know,
AK-47s, Mac 11s, Glocks and 9s, and all.
See Music Factory Make You Go was in 1990, and it's the things that make you go is the hook.
There was opening statements. What about the defendant's demeanor in the courtroom, from both the prosecution's opening statement and for the defense opening statement?
Well, for the defendant, Melly was very calm, collected. I guess I would say when the prosecution gave some retelling of what was going on, he kind of was annoyed, and you would see him write stuff down on the notes for a little bit. But other than that, he just kept it calm, kept it real calm.
All right. So, are there any celebrities or famous faces in attendance in that courtroom today? Oh, you got a big smile on your face, Bryson Paul.
Actually, yes. Boosie, or Lil Boosie, the artist from Louisiana, came to support. Him and Melly have a history, and Boosie actually gave him the defense information for his murder case.
Wow. So now we know about that. Now let's get a little bit closer. What about the victim's family? Are they in the court? And if so, have they been reacting to not just seeing Melly in the courtroom, but seeing the opening statements and the testimony?
They've been very inconsolable, I would say, as the trial kicked off, and even just as different testimonies were being given, even in the opening statement from the prosecution. Once the names of the two victims were mentioned, even with them just being called brothers, best friends, or whatnot, the families of the victims would be inconsolable and often have to walk out.
It's always hard for families of the victims if the defendant, no matter who's on trial, whether he's innocent or whether he's guilty. But speaking about the defendant, was his family there? And if they were there, can you tell us about their reaction to day one of the trial, Bryson?
Actually, yes. All his mother, brother, grandparents, all of them were in attendance, and they all were as calm as he was, I would say.
Wow, very interesting, because that must have been something that the attorney must have told them to remain calm no matter what. But while the court is on lunch recess, we know that the prosecution is getting ready for more witnesses. What can we expect after the lunch break?
We'll continue with the third witness, Hector Burton. Burton, a retired police officer who was on hand during the evening of the double murder and who spoke to Bolton, the co-defendant in Melly's case, at the hospital.
Wow. So was that witness, just my last question before I let you go, was that witness effective for the prosecution, or was it the hook and the rap song that make you go,
It was definitely the hook of the rap song that made you go, Like the audio, or we were pretty much just going through the audio right now of him and Bolton's conversation. And he was just trying to recollect after he mentioned that he's dealt with a lot of cases in the last 25 years before he retired. So it made him kind of iffy about what happened as far as what he remembered that night. So the audio just played of him and Bolton having their conversation and him asking if there was weapons in the car, if there was gun residue on Bolton himself, and just if they had previous beef with anybody, to corroborate with Bolton's story that it was a drive-by.
Very, very interesting. Well, Bryson, thank you for that very effective wrap-up, telling us what's going, and that was not intended to be a pun. I know you're smiling. What's going on in that courtroom? I know you have to get back in, and I know
they have no reason for why he would do this, because there is no reason. It's the first indication that they're just guessing and don't know what they're talking. And that, ladies and gentlemen, by itself is reasonable doubt. Why he would commit such a heinous crime against his own two best friends for no reason. What happened here is that the lead detective, Detective Moretti, saw a video of Mr. Demons getting into a car 40 plus minutes before bodies were found in that car. And then he discovered that Mr. Demons was a rising star. And from that point on, he decided he's the only person that could have committed this crime. Because if you're involved in prosecuting a star, you become a star. This was his big break. And he had tunnel vision, and he zeroed in on this person, this young man, as the only possible perpetrator of that crime, to the exclusion of all other leads and evidence.
Chris, what did you think when David Howard said that?
It was all just something that made up. I don't believe nothing that he was just saying. Because that's the same theory that his managers was pushing on us. Like, oh, it's not Melly. You know how the white man always trying to take the black man down and this, that, and another. He's just a successful black guy. I don't want to hear none of that. That's not true. If anything, why him? Why Melly? Why just put this on him? Why Melly? It don't make sense. They just throwing Hail Marys, like throwing stuff to the wall, hoping it sticks.
David Howard also says that the police botched this investigation. Let's listen to him talk about that.
They don't follow leads. They have no motive. Investigation was botched. The investigation, as a matter of fact, is still going on as we speak, up to a couple months ago. Yet they're here telling you they have proof beyond a reasonable doubt and what you're still investigating for. The job of the state is to prove it beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt. And if you're a reasonable person and you have doubt, that's reasonable doubt. There's a song called Things That Make You Go, If you say, that's reasonable doubt. You do not. Ms. Bradley is charming. She's good at her job in some respects. But this is not a popularity contest. We don't give, hey, good effort. We don't give participation awards. This man's life is hanging in the balance. And if there is a scintilla of reasonable doubt, you must have the courage to speak up and say so. You're not here to judge him. You're here to judge the sufficiency of their case. They have a big task in front of them. We should probably get to it.
Wow. So what were your thoughts? And do you believe that this investigation was botched?
Oh, man. I don't think it was botched. I think they did a great job, and everything will come together in the end. And he's just trying to put a little thought in the jury's minds. Like, he wasn't even trying to tell them, like, he's innocent. He's just, like, trying to, like, put a reasonable doubt. Not that he's innocent. He's not trying to prove his innocence. Like, it's like, to me, they know he did it. They're just trying to get, I don't know. They just know he did it. They're not trying to prove his innocence.
I feel like so often you get into the evidence and really the victims get lost in these trials. Just any final words about your son?
It's always forever long live Juvie. I miss him and love him to death. He got a lot of Melly fans that be spamming my inbox and all over. Even y'all guys chat talking about free Melly. But one of their loved ones was to get murdered. And imagine the whole world saying free the alleged killer of that guy. It just make you feel some type of way and just want to crash out yourself because, I don't know, first they trying to make it seem like Chris and Sack was extorting Melly, which is a false narrative that his camp painted. That was never true. And Chris never did nothing to nobody. They can't even say nothing he did to Melly. Nothing that they can't show anything that made him want to do anything to Chris. And that's what got me the way I'm feeling because Chris never did anything. And he loved that dude. And that dude did that to him. I never accept that. And to everybody that's on his side is on the opposite side of me.
If he's convicted, would you like him to get the death penalty? Because he's the first person to go, have the death penalty as a potential punishment since the law change lowered the threshold for it.
Yes, I for an eye. Old Testament. I think he deserved it. Because they show no remorse. They still trying to badmouth these boys. And when it happened, Melly and Kristen had Instagram pages. He went on his page. They went on his page. Whoever took all the pictures down of Chris and Anthony and made it look like they was never existed. If he's so innocent, they never put up a reward to find the killer. They never did a tribute. They never did anything. They even pushed Chris' funeral back from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. just so Melly could make it, and he still didn't show up. And he never showed at the Sack funeral. So this your best friend, and you don't even come to the funeral? I don't know, man. That guy deserves everything coming his way. And I have no sympathy for him. Him or nobody in his family.
Well, Chris Thomas Sr., thank you so much for joining us. I know this is not easy. We appreciate you giving us some of your time. Melly posted on Twitter, "They took my brothers from me over jealousy. I know y'all watching over me." Months later, in April of 2019, Melly was charged with killing his friends. He pleaded not guilty. With the support of the victims' families, prosecutors said they would seek the death penalty. Bortland also faces murder charges. His trial date has not yet been set. Melly talked about Juvie and Sack Chaser's names being tattooed on his face before they were killed. They were in a room with him during an interview for a podcast.
So what you got tattooed on your face? Tell me about it a little bit.
What? On my face?
Yeah. We got the heart on this side.
Heart.
What's that say above your eyebrow on that side?
Which side?
Oh, either one. What's it?
I know I got Sack Chaser right here. That's my brother and my twin.
Okay.
And I got Juvie.
Juvie?
Yeah, my brother.
Just a lot of your friends who passed?
Yeah. Nah, them right there.
Oh, okay.
My brother's right there.
My bad. I wouldn't get none of my friends tattooed on my face until they died.
Melly rose to fame while serving time for a 2015 shooting incident. Police said that he fired a gun at several people outside of his high school. He was just 16 at the time.
When you were in jail, did you feel like, were you ever at a point where you felt like all hope was lost?
Yeah.
You did?
Yeah. When I first got locked up, because I ain't know what they was gonna do. I ain't know. I thought, damn. I was so young. I ain't know. I was like, damn. This before I made Murder on My Mind. I was like, man, hell no. They finna give me a year.
Murder on My Mind was Melly's biggest hit, along with Balenciaga Blues. His career was on the rise.
So what was it like working with Kanye?
Awesome.
Awesome?
Super mega awesome cool.
But there's more to Melly than just music. He's also talked about something else that's going on within him. He claims to have 2 or more personalities.
So who am I talking to right now? Am I talking to Melly, Melvin, Mel? Like, who am I talking to?
You talking to Melvin, because I'm mad right now.
What are you mad about?
You know I'm mad. We ain't gonna talk about that right now.
What you mad about?
We said let it go, so we gonna let it go. All right, Melly is loving, genuine, turned up, happy, and just loving, you know what I'm saying? Michael Jackson. Melly is Michael Jackson.
The other personality he discusses is much darker. His name is Melvin.
But Melvin, I only let him out at nighttime, and I need to stop doing that. Like, when the night hits, he really come, and it's like, Melvin is just like, once you play with Melly to a certain extent, Melvin just don't like that. Melvin on your ass. No cap. He on your ass. He don't play.
Like many trials, Melly's has been delayed several times because of COVID, but also because of arguments over the death penalty and evidence. Jury selection has been underway since April. At that time, Melly's mom, Jamie King, posted on Instagram, "Melly coming home. Today I went to court expecting more delays, but we started jury selection. I can't explain how I feel. My anxiety is everywhere, but God got us." Opening statements are expected next month. In an unrelated case, a news report from 2019 claimed law enforcement suspected Melly and Bortland might be involved in the fatal shooting of off-duty Sheriff's Deputy Gary Chambliss. His 2017 murder remains unsolved, and investigators will not confirm whether the two are suspects. Joining me to discuss Ynw Melly's upcoming murder trial is Mina Lona. She is an on-air personality at SiriusXM The Heat and at 100.3 FM in Philly. Also, Jules Epstein is with us. He is a professor at Temple University's Beasley School of Law and a death penalty expert. Thanks to both of you for being with us today.
Thank you for having us.
Mina, I want to start with you. Let's talk a little bit about why there is so much interest in this case. We know that this happened back in 2018, these homicides. Melly was arrested and charged in 2019. He's been in jail ever since. He was really an up-and-coming rising star when this happened.
I think that's the interest, the fact that he garnered attention from someone like Kanye West, who was featured on a song with him. He was this rising star, and out of nowhere, this situation happened, which is really a mystery. What happened here? Who was the car? Was this part of a drive-by shooting? Was it a shooting that involved the people inside of the car? I think the fact that he does have a song that it's called Murder on My Mind, where he talks about accidentally shooting someone. I think all those things add to the interest in the story and just the I guess the riddle of what happened here.
And another thing too, I mean, he has a certain level of charisma. Am I wrong about that? Because he seems to really be a charmer when he does these interviews. And the thing about the personalities is something that really kind of piques my interest, because he talks about how he's got Melly, who's this sweet, loving guy, but then Melvin comes out after dark and all bets are off.
I think he's very much an entertainer, and we've seen it play out in his debut album, which literally explored this dual personality that he has. It's kind of like an alternative character, but I think it's also an extension of his mental state of mind, right? He's been diagnosed with bipolar syndrome, ADHD. So all of this contributes to the fact that he seems to be someone who has battled some mental and behavioral issues. And he's kind of made it into the entertainment world. And he's managed to create this persona off of his battles that he's dealing with, which you will hear a lot of that in the music, the things that he's rapping about. And yeah, I think he's entertaining. And all of this really intrigues people and makes them wonder, who is this guy? What is he about? What personality is he today? And what happened on the night in question? Was this a situation where maybe he had a issue with his mental health? All of this contributes to the interest in this story. And I also think that the fact that we haven't heard about what's going on with his case and trial for 4 years, I think that the death penalty now being put on the table, I think that adds to the interest in what happened, what's going to be the defense, what is the prosecution going to say, and how is the death penalty now being on the table? How is that going to impact this trial?
Jules, I want to address that with you. We do have a young guy here. He's 24 now, but when this happened, he would have been, 18, 19 years old. So in many respects, yes, legally an adult, but also still mentally probably a little bit of a kid. If you look at some of the research out there about how people mature and brain development, things like that. He's going to say he didn't do this at trial. So if we're talking strictly the guilt phase, the things that Mina brought up, the bipolar disorder, the ADHD, how does any of this play into defending him?
Legally, none. In other words, if he's saying, I wasn't in the car, I was somewhere else, it doesn't matter if he's a genius. It doesn't matter if he has a learning disability. It doesn't matter if he has a diagnosis of bipolar. Mental health issues come in when a person's state of mind is at play. If someone said, I shot, but I was in fear. I shot in a momentary state of mental disarray, then mental state is relevant. If it's saying, I wasn't there, it's not relevant.
Well, we know that Melly was in the car. And really the facts of this case, when we look at it, are that they left the recording studio after a late night session. And they claim, Melly and his co-conspirator claim, that this was a drive-by. But the police claim that's not the case. They claim that there's no evidence of a shooting where they claim that this drive-by happened. Their cell phones put them in a different area of town at the time, and that these shots likely came from the back seat where Melly was sitting. So all of that on its face, Jules, sounds really, really bad. But as things unfold at trial, you never know how they're going to go.
So now we're talking about forensic analysis, and forensic analysis is only as good as the people who do it and the discipline that they are deploying. In terms of where a bullet was fired from, that is not always that hard to discern, okay? You can recreate angles. There may be issues of ricochets or things that can distort angles, but the police, at least from the news reports, seem pretty confident that they can prove the shots were from inside the car, indeed from the location in the car, as you put it, where he was seated. If that's true, because my recollection, and I only began familiarizing myself with this case yesterday, is that at least initially he said he wasn't in the car, that there were different disputes, and then their video putting him in the car. So first of all, his own history of changed statements becomes admissible evidence. And that doesn't mean he did anything wrong, but in the court of law, people's change of stories, denying I was there, but now it's, oh, I was there, but someone else shot, is in the law fair game for the prosecutor, and it makes the case harder.
And they have said that there were inconsistent statements made by Melly and his co-conspirator. Jules, let's touch on the change in the death penalty law in Florida that Governor DeSantis signed earlier this year. It doesn't have to be unanimous anymore if they get to that penalty phase where the jury will consider punishment. It doesn't have to be a 12-0 decision anymore. It can be 8-4. So
Right.
say he is convicted. He's a 24-year-old guy, was a much younger guy when this happened. He could more easily get the death penalty. So your thoughts on that?
So I'm going to take it back a step, if I may. First of all, just making this a death penalty case makes it more easy for him to be found guilty, because people who are on a death penalty jury tend to be more conservative, because you have to at least somewhat believe in the death penalty. When they get to that second trial, because it's really two trials, trial one, did you do it? Trial two, what's your punishment? The jury does have to be unanimous about one thing: whether the government has proved what is called an aggravating circumstance. So it's not just, hey, you're guilty, but they've actually listed 4 possible aggravating circumstances. As long as the jury agrees as to one unanimously, then they do this vote. And you are right, it used to be unanimous. And that was really important, because the death penalty should only be given when the real community really agrees this is right. Florida's now said, we don't care if 1/3 of you don't agree. If 2/3 of you do, that gives the judge permission. And given that you're starting with a group of people who are in favor of the death penalty, raising the number of dissents that can still be ignored makes it easier to get a death sentence.
And you just used to have it had to be one juror. Say one juror disagreed, it was a life sentence. So I think that's pretty interesting. And I think you bring up a very valid point, because so our listeners and viewers are aware, when it is a death penalty case, it adds a layer to that jury selection process where they have to make sure these jurors are so-called death qualified, meaning they say are willing to follow the law and impose the death penalty if they feel it's necessary and it's been proven to be warranted. Mina, I know that you had some thoughts and feelings on that. We were talking last night about how, this is a younger guy, 24 years old. The facts of the case are that these people were all friends. I mean, they were all in his kind of crew, his group of friends who produce music together. So he's facing the death penalty at 24 years old, or at least the possibility of it, when he is alleged to have committed a crime 5 years ago.
This is disturbing to me, just because of the changes in what we're talking about. From my understanding, from the lowering of the threshold for the death penalty was as a result of the Parkland shooting that happened in Florida. And as we know, this is a premeditated murder by one man who went into a high school, and shot 17 people and murdered 17 people, students, staff, teacher. He said he was guilty. So I understand lowering the threshold for someone like that, right? Even though me personally, I don't agree with death penalty. I don't think death penalty has any place in a civilized society. I am a woman of a religious background, and I believe that the only person that should be, and I don't want to bring religion into this, but my personal beliefs are that there's one higher being that should be in charge of taking our lives. And I just, as a person, don't agree with this, but I do understand that there are heinous individuals on our earth that have done atrocious things. And I understand why the death penalty is put in place. I just think it's very dangerous when you lower it to such a low standard, where you're not only taking the life of people who may be heinous, but also people who may not be heinous, and people who might have a mental illness in this situation, someone who might have bipolar depression, someone who might be ADHD, maybe compulsive issues and can't compose themselves. And all these things I think are dangerous. In this particular situation, we don't know what happened. They were all friends. This could have been a mistake. This could have been a lapse of judgment. It's up to the prosecutor to prove that. But I think at the end of the day, he has said that he is innocent. And after this happened, he went on social media and he said, I lost my brothers. So there's so many unknowns about this case. Were they shot at? Did he do the shooting? Regardless of the situation, that is not the same as the Parkland mass murder shooting that happened. And I think it's very dangerous as a society when we start applying the death penalty to cases that not only involve mental health individuals, but also that don't involve premeditated murder and defendants claiming that they're innocent.
May I jump in?
Of course, Jules.
Okay. So I just want to say, following up on what Mina said, I want to separate the heinous deed from the heinous person. Okay. I actually know a lot about the Parkland case. That was a heinous deed by a person, Mina, who had even more psychiatric and emotional problems than the one you're describing here. And one of the problems is that people conflate or mix together how terrible the murder is, as all murders are terrible, but some are even worse, from how terrible this person is. I think your other point, which is really, really critical, is there are murders that happen after days and weeks and months of planning. And then there's something that happened in the moment. The law treats them the same. Right or wrong, okay? The law treats, if I plan a murder for a month, or if I look at you, I'd never do this, and say, Mina, I want you dead, bang, you're dead. Those are both treated the same as premeditated, even though I premeditated for a second, not a month. But you are right that the less planning, the more spur of the moment, the more situational, that should help to take a case out of death penalty world. I need to add one other thing, which is something we haven't mentioned, which is the race of Melly. Because we all know that race remains the thumb on the scale. And like it or not, no matter how well-intentioned people are, to some people, they look at a young Black man and they'll look at them differently than if it were my young white son, no matter what else is going on. And that's yet another problem that Melly faces here.
And I think it's important that we point out the difference. Obviously, Nicholas Cruz, much different. We know how much planning went into that. These are two completely different cases.
Right.
And in Nicholas Cruz's case, they gave him life. So I think it's important to note that as well. They found that there were mitigating circumstances. And we're not even to that point yet, but it's important to talk about this as we kind of do an overview of this case. And it'll be interesting to learn more about the facts of the case and what the prosecutors are alleging as the motive. Because as I mentioned, these were a group of people, 4 people who were friends and produced music together. So Mina, Lona, thank you so much for joining us. Jules Epstein, professor of law, thank you as well. It's been great talking with you. And we hope to have you back as we cover this trial as it begins and moves forward.
Yes, thank you.
I just got them bitches back from somebody that got them took them from me. You know what I'm saying? Someone took your shoes? Yeah, and I had to get them back. And I had to clean them up. They took your shoes. Fuck them up, man. I just cleaned them yesterday. He stole from you? He some kind of switched them out, his shoes, his shoes. Who's your homeboy? He's recording out. His name is JAMELL.
Excuse me, you're able to see? Yes? All right.